Welcome to Education 101 with your host, Erik Wolfrum. Education 101 is about the amazing education community we have in the greater Spokane area. We highlight the outstanding programs, teachers, supporters, and opportunities of the education community in the Spokane region. Education 101 is brought to you in part by STCU. Here's Erik.
And welcome to Education 101. Today we're going to be talking about improving, test scores, grades, graduation rates in a low-income school in John R. Rogers, right? Here in Spokane. And I'm your host, Erik Wolfrum, and with me today, I've got Lori Wyborney, the principal at Rogers High School. So welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Excellent. So, Lori, you guys have some really cool things going on. Let's talk a little bit about Rogers, and maybe some of it is we talk about low income, and maybe what does that mean? What are the demographics with Rogers? Let's start there, and then we'll start to kind of get into that whole idea of what are some of those things that you guys have been doing, because you've seen some great progress at that school since you've been there.
Well, the 99207 zip code, which feeds into Rogers, is generally in the top three as the poorest in the state of Washington. Oftentimes it is number one. I think in the last time we looked at the last census, we were number one.
Wow.
We had gotten down to number three, so that was good, but now we're back up to number one.
Now you're back.
Yeah, so it is an area of Spokane that sees a tremendous amount of low-income homes, for sure.
Right.
And really, there isn't an area of affluence at all that actually feeds into Rogers.
That doesn't feed into it, yeah.
Right. It is, I think every elementary school is 78 or above free and reduced, and both middle schools are in the 80s, and we are near 80 at 79.
And that's Gary and Shaw that feed into
Yep, we have eight
guys.
Elementary and two middle that feed into Rogers.
Right.
Yeah.
What's your percentage free and reduced at Rogers?
It's about 79%.
Is it? That's
it
big.
fluctuates between 78 and 80, 81 at one point in time. So it's been fluctuating a little bit. But that's mostly just a reporting issue. I mean, really, it's probably closer to 95, to be really honest.
Absolutely.
So it's very high. And with that comes a lot of other things about anywhere from 40 to 60% of my students are coming out of trauma, extreme trauma, where they've been affected by violence or drugs and alcohol or jail or just all kinds of things that trigger fairly bad responses.
Yeah.
And so they deal with a lot of that. It is an area that has one of the highest unemployment rates in the state of Washington. So the state of Washington's like 4.8. In the 99207, it's 12.7. So it's almost 3 times.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It is amazing. It is amazing. And if you look at like the houses in the 99207 zip code, there are only 3 that are valued over $150,000. And the average mean in the state of Washington is like $350,000.
Huh.
So it's significantly less. Most of them were built like in the 20s and 30s.
Yep.
It's 48% of my students live in rentals.
Wow.
Yeah, it really impacts a student's learning, not necessarily their ability to learn, but just where they are in learning. And it just requires some additional supports to get students to the same place you'd get an affluent student.
Right, and I really like that piece of it. It doesn't hinder their ability to learn.
Not at all.
But their process. And it's got to be a mind piece when you're going through that kind of trauma of, even the idea of, where's my next meal coming from?
Right.
But from a teacher's point of view, you want them to learn these things, and that's got to be a tough thing. I spent part of my career teaching at Gary, which is one of your feeder schools as well, and ran into that. I talk a lot about that idea of when I first got there. I'd hear excuses, and I would say, okay, I get it, but. And it didn't take me long to say, you know what, I don't get it, but let's see how I can support you to be able to move from that excuse to see how we can help you learn along the way. So I think that trauma piece is definitely a huge piece as we kind of go through it. So you guys have made some big steps in dealing with and helping those kids learn, because
yes.
you've really seen the data start to shoot up and really started to see some of those things. So let's talk about some of those things that you guys have done, because I think it's really exciting to give those kids that might not have the opportunity to do the things they're doing the opportunity to do it.
It's been really fun. This is my 11th year there, and I will tell you that I'm surrounded by an amazing staff, amazing assistant principals. I get great support from Spokane Public Schools. I feel like everything is in the right place for us to really get where we need to get, which is in the 90s.
Yeah.
But we've done so many things. It's hard to really narrow it down to those things that have probably been the most impactful. But I will say in 2011 we were awarded about a $3 million federal grant, Race to the Top grant, that really did make a difference because we extended the school day and we extended the school year. And those two things, there was a definite change in student achievement just on that alone. That additional half hour was actually used as a place for students to be able to talk with other teachers, catch up if they were behind on tests, do homework, get help from someone, a tutor or an academic mentor or a teacher. And so we really saw some improvement just on that. In fact, when that went away because it became too expensive after the grant, our students really missed it. Believe it or not, our students missed an extra half hour of school. Do you love that?
That's awesome.
It was awesome. So it's been really, it was interesting to see how that worked. But we also have just put into place a lot of supports for our students. I have a very large counseling department that has academic mentors. It has a social worker. I have mental health therapists. I have drug and alcohol counselor. I have counselors that work just in college and career. I have counselors that do just mostly social emotional. So our kids can get the support that they need because, you said it earlier, it's hard to concentrate on, linear equations when your belly is rumbling at you because you're so hungry, or when you don't know where you're going to sleep that night, or you don't know, how it's going to be at home. Those are very difficult things to manage and then still try to do work. And so we try to provide a lot of that social emotional support for students so that they can be successful, so that they can then be successful at school. And it's difficult. What we've really seen an increase in the last 3 years, and all of Spokane has, just the number of kids who are very depressed.
Really?
Yes. I don't know the answer necessarily, but it's concerning.
That is.
But we provide a lot of interventions. We have in-school interventions where if students are struggling, we have some in-school interventions that we can do. We have classrooms for them to go to get help. We have places where they can go to catch up on credits. And then we have, of course, before and after school interventions. We have 3 different buses that pick up our students after school, so they can spend some time after school with teachers in our homework center, doing all those kind of things, not just activities, but actually doing academic work. And so a lot of our students take advantage of that. And it's really helped them for sure, because again, they can totally learn, they can totally do this. They just need that little extra support that, let's say, a student that is affluent on the South Hill gets at home every night. We try to provide that in a different way at our school with our teaching staff.
And that's what I was going to say too, is that becomes that's the constant for the kids, I think, is being at school. And it needs to be that positive and safe environment as well. So they know that that's always that consistent piece that goes along with it. And having that many counselors, I mean, that's I would agree with you, that's got to be a huge piece and a huge factor. I've seen so many more times the further that I go in my career is how important the adults are at the school for the success of the school, whether it's the leaders, the teachers, the counselors, the custodians, the staff. I mean, everybody's in it. It's that true, you need a village to raise the kids, and these are our kids when they're with us.
They are. Well, our school motto is "We are family." So
that's awesome. You guys play the song?
No, I don't even think our kids know that song.
You should.
I know.
When you're working with with that population, and I know you get the opportunity to talk a lot out there, are there misconceptions that you hear from, I'll say, the public even, or teachers that come in, or teachers that talk to other teachers there? Or come some of those? I wonder.
Sure. So I'll answer that two ways. Yeah, the public has a lot of misconception about poverty, and especially kids in poverty. It's not uncommon for my students to hear them being called names like hoodlums or gangsters or something like that. And it's disappointing that there is a lack of understanding of what poverty really means. And the one thing I remind people all the time is none of us chose our parents.
No.
I lucked out, and I had the two greatest parents in the world, and I had the easiest childhood ever. But that isn't true for every
That's
kid.
right.
And they don't choose it, but they don't have any choice afterwards either on how to navigate it. And it's not really until they get into their late teens and early adulthood that they can really start to make those changes. So it's remembering that nobody chooses that. And I promise you, if you did let them choose, they would all choose the affluent home.
Yeah,
There's no
different
doubt
piece.
about it.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the misconceptions is these are kids that are some of the most amazing. I've spent my whole career actually teaching in schools of fairly high poverty, but I am always blown away when I compare them to my own childhood, just how much more grit and how much more perseverance and resourcefulness. If some of the things had happened to me that has happened to my students, I don't know that I would have been able to survive like they have. They come to school every day. They try. They get up and keep going. And I just think I would be sitting on a curb crying.
Absolutely.
So that part's amazing. The other part is in terms of our staff, we really are very careful about how we screen and how we interview. We do not typically ask questions like, can you do a linear equation?
Yeah.
When we do the screening, we make sure that the people that we interview can do the subject area that we're asking for.
Yeah.
So we don't really ask a lot of questions about that. We ask questions like, why are people poor? How are you going to respond to a student who is in crisis? We ask questions like that, and that usually can unveil for us a mindset. And we're looking for definitely a particular kind of mindset that believes all kids can do anything given the right opportunities and the right supports.
Yeah. You mentioned two things there. You talked about the whole idea of the kids in grit, and then kind of how you come about to getting your staff and the right people on the right seats on the bus.
Right,
So what we're going to do is let's take a quick break, and then when we come back, let's talk more about some of the great things that are happening at Rogers.
Awesome.
So we'll be right back. Thanks.
Hi everyone, I'm weather forecaster and assignment anchor at Spokane Talks Online, Colin Pittman, and I am honored to be the host of the new program, Spokane's Youth Spotlight, brought to you by Spokane Talks Online and the Spokesman Review, where we are interviewing and getting to know outstanding youth in our community each month. If you'd like to nominate someone in our community that you think should be recognized, that is doing something great here in the region or has an amazing story, visit SpokaneTalksOnline.com or Spokesman.com and look under Youth Spotlight to nominate. And be sure to tune in each month as we find the best in the Inland Northwest.
They say it takes a community to raise a family. It also takes one to build a business. I came to Spokane 12 years ago as a Whitworth student, and I planned to leave after graduation. But the more I got to know this community, the more I wanted to become a part of it. My husband and I have built our business in Spokane, and now we're raising our family here too. We operate a consulting company that provides creative business development strategies. Our approach is holistic and dependent on intentional connections and relationships. And no one understands connections and relationships better than GSI. They direct momentum towards investments in our community, provide resources that help business leaders connect, and they're dedicated and passionate about making Spokane great. GSI gives me the confidence to build my business here because they believe every organization, even a small one like mine, adds big value to our community. With GSI's help, Spokane will be a place my son will want to build his career too. I'm Eva Marquette, owner of Freshview. We're creating something greater with Greater Spokane Incorporated.
Hi, this is Kurt Stockwell with Well Dressed Walrus. We are a local website design and development company here in Spokane. What we do is build beautiful, usable websites for local businesses. A website needs to be beautiful, it needs to be usable for your users, your customers, and yourself. Contact us anytime. We'd love to talk with you about your online marketing.
What? You haven't been to the library lately? Stop in today and see that the library is more than books. Spokane County Library District facilities feature on-site technology, including Wi-Fi, computers, and printers, as well as free use of meeting rooms. The Library District offers events and programs for all ages, from story times to career development and employer classes to Social Security workshops. Our staff is well trained and happy to help. Find out more about your library at scld.org.
And welcome back to Education 101. Again, I'm your host, Erik Wolfrum, and today we're talking again with Lori Wyborney from Rogers High School. So before we left, we were talking a little bit. You were saying some of the misconceptions, and you know that the one piece was the grit of the kids as they come to you. That perseverance, if you will, of you know really digging out of the hole, and then also the idea of getting the right teachers, the right people on the bus.
Absolutely.
So you know that grit piece. Is that something that, from a teacher's perspective, that you guys, I guess, go after and utilize in the classroom or from a school-wide?
When we can identify it, yes. So just this year, the district has started a panorama survey of students.
Okay.
And in that survey, it can identify with students their level of grit. And so then we can look at individual students and kind of see where they are and then kind of see how they answered to figure out, you know, why do they feel that way, whichever way it is, to help us kind of support students better. So I think in the next couple of years, that's going to get a lot more interesting because now we actually have a tool to identify it, which will help. Because I think if you ask 10 teachers what grit means, you might get 8 different answers.
Yeah.
You know, and so this sort of defines it a little more more narrowly.
Yeah.
And so then it kind of helps us all sort of understand. So that will actually help. But really what it is just the fact that they show up to school in spite of what goes on in their lives, and that they keep trying in the face of educational gaps, and you know, they don't have a lot of social capital, and you know, what we find is that vocabulary seems to be the really big thing missing. I always use this example in my BC AP calculus class. So these are students that are taking
AP Calc,
that are taking second and third year calculus in advanced placement classes. These are kids who have really worked hard and have really gotten to a high level of mathematics. And last year they were taking a practice test and they did really poorly on this one problem. And the teacher was really concerned because he knows he had studied, you know, he had taught them the math. So as he's unveiling this with them, it comes out that they didn't know what in the question was the word annually. And they didn't know what it meant. Once he explained what annually meant, they could totally do the math.
Wow.
So it's this one little words that we would not really think is going to be the hang up. And so we're really trying to dive into academic vocabulary and literacy and those kind of things to really help support our students. Because we know that students from low-income homes generally have about 1,000 less vocabulary words than affluent students. So we're really working at that, because even at the top end of our kids, there are these words that they're like, I'm not really sure what that means. It's not that they couldn't do the math. They could totally do the math. I know. It was so funny. It was a really great experience for my teacher, because he was like, oh my gosh, now I know what I need to work on. You know, so we continue to uncover little things like that, but we know that literacy and vocabulary really are the foundation that our students need. And we do a school-wide literacy program across all curriculums.
What's that look like?
So we have all common academic vocabulary that we use, and every discipline has their own academic vocabulary. So they're using that. We work on a lot of things like annotating text, and we do this in math, we do this in science, we do this in PE, we do this in art. So students are reading a lot of text, subject area text, and annotating that and diving into the vocabulary, the concepts, what they know, what they don't know, really being able to deconstruct that so that they have better reading comprehension.
Right.
We also do, reading goes beyond just reading text. It's charts, it's graphs, it's all kinds of things like that. So we try to, really vary up the kind of reading. Plus, in a social studies or an English class, students do a lot of analytical reading. So they're analyzing the reading. What does this mean? What does the author mean when he says this, etc.? Whereas like in math and science or CTE classes, they do technical reading. Like, here's the 8 steps to, put this vacuum together or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Or how I'm
IKEA.
going to do this lab or how you're going to do this problem. And that's technical reading. And so really focusing on those 2 types of reading so that kids can increase their ability to read. Because we know, there's nothing you're going to be able to do in the world in which you will not need reading. You will always need reading. So we really try to focus on that as well. And we've really seen jumps in our SAT scores as a medium of a whole class. So we jumped like 100 points in a year, which is incredible.
That's amazing.
Yes, it is. We're still not where we want to be with our SAT scores, but we're definitely seeing, as whole cohorts of kids, a medium score that is actually increasing. So that's good because...
Which means you're making progress.
We are. Now, we're not seeing that same progress on the state SBAC test in reading or ELA, it's now called English Language Arts. And we're a little confused by that. So we're diving into that a little harder to kind of see what's holding us up there a little bit. It is reading, I'm fairly convinced,
But it sounds like that's one of the pieces that you guys have put into place is the whole reading, academic vocabulary. I love the idea of expanding reading beyond just opening the book or opening even informational text, same thing, but taking a look at charts, graphs, instructions, all those things
lyrics.
Are truly... Yeah,
it's
that's
amazing
all reading,
how
and I like that.
and it's really important to be able to do all of that because you will encounter all of that in your life.
Well, and I think one of the things that I always find is that relevance and interest piece goes along with
Sure.
it too. And so if you open it up, you're going to be able to find that interest and that relevance along the way. So.
It really, it's amazing. We about 10 years ago, I had an amazing instructional coach, Pat. She was amazing. And she discovered that our library really didn't hold a lot of books that would be of interest to boys. So we spent a lot of money, got a lot of grants, and started and it really did. We really saw that bump because there was a pretty big difference between girls and boys in our, like at that time, WASL scores. And when we did that, we really saw that balance back out.
Out.
So that was good.
Just that little piece, but being able to find find those little things that are different.
Yeah, boys don't want to read about romance novels. Amazingly enough, they didn't like them. It was really weird. I know, right?
Yeah. Exactly. So you're seeing some improvement SAT-wise.
Yep.
Graduation rate's been one that you guys have seen a lot of increase as well. What would you attribute that to?
Oh my gosh, so many things. So in 2007, we had a 49.8% graduation rate. So half of our students were not graduating.
Yeah.
Over the next 3 years, 08, 9, and 10, we saw relatively little change. One of them hit, I think, 55. And one of them, after several years of re-looking at it by the state, got it, I think, to 60. And then in 2011, we jumped to 76. So we had a pretty significant jump there. And I attribute almost all of that to just really technical changes in the system. So how we're calculating. First of all, let me remind everybody that before 2008, nobody was looking at graduation rates.
Right.
And in 2008, the president made all the governors get together and agree on one way of calculating graduation rates so that everybody was calculating it the same.
Right.
And they used the cohort model of calculating, and we're still using that. So that's one thing. And so it was just us figuring out, what is this calculation? How does this work? Who counts? Who doesn't count?
Sure.
How do you keep track of this over a course of a 4-year period? And so it was really just kind of, that first big jump was really us just getting the technical pieces in place so that we could figure out really
Yeah.
where we were at. I would argue a little bit that those '07 and prior graduation rates really aren't all that accurate.
Sure.
Because everybody was doing it so differently.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. And we took work away from counselors, and we hired data processors and things that could do some of the data processing that needed to happen so that we could always calculate. Since then, from 76 to where we are now in the mid-'80s, two things have been what have changed it. I think what got us out of the 70s and into the 80s was the work we did with our English language development students.
Huh.
So we have a high population of students who speak another language
Yep.
as their primary language. At Rogers, I think we speak 17 different languages.
Huh.
We have about 170 ELD students.
Wow.
And we just really started targeting them. And, really, honestly, for the most part, we started exiting them out of program because they'd been taught what they needed to be taught and putting them into gen ed classes, particularly English and math.
Yeah.
And they did a lot better.
Did they do good?
They did. And so we have found some ways to kind of support our ELD kids a little bit better so that they can now graduate on time. Because really, even before that, it wasn't even a priority to graduate them in 4 years.
Right.
Because they needed so much language. They wanted them to stay longer.
Needed
And
so much
now
language,
we're like,
yeah.
well, we can't. So,
Yep.
so we kind of have. And I think for us to go from the mid-'80s now to the '90s, it lives in special education.
Right.
We have about 350 special ed students with IEPs, and their graduation rate, if you take them just as a cohort of themselves, sits around 65%, 67. So we got work to do there.
Right.
And we over the last 5 years, we have been just redoing a lot of things in special ed. We are a full inclusion school. So students who can are fully included. So they're getting with content experts all the time.
Yeah.
They're getting support in what we call a CAP class.
Sure.
So for us to get into the 90s, it means moving our SPED students through the system a little bit better and supporting them a lot better.
Right.
So that they can graduate on time.
In thinking of graduation rate, you're talking about your English language development students, your special education students, two different populations. And I might not say this the right way, but in the general population, are you seeing increases as well? And again, I don't know if that's the right way to say it, and I apologize if it's not. But
well, everything now is broken up by demographics. So
Right.
I have it broken up into about 12 different demographics all the time.
yeah.
Honestly, our Asian students do the best.
Uh-huh.
They usually sit around a 95% graduation rate.
Okay.
My Hispanic students are not too far behind, high 80s.
Great.
Everybody else really sits kind of where we are, 84, 83, 85, kind of sit there, except for my special ed, and every once in a while my ELD,
And that's
and
why-
sometimes my Native American students.
And that's why you're
Right.
really highlighting
Yep,
those
yep.
those
and it's just so many. I mean,
populations.
350 special ed
Yeah,
kids is a lot
that's
of
a
kids.
lot.
4 kids make 1% in our graduation rate.
I was going to say, so what's your special ed percentage?
Well, it depends
Roughly.
on who you're asking. If you ask me, and I do the count, it's about 22%.
That's
The
big.
district will say it's about 19.
Either
I don't know
way.
why we have that
Yeah.
discrepancy.
Both of those.
I'm sure I'm more right
huge.
than they are,
I'm
though.
sure you are. I'm sure
Right.
you are. Both of those. That's
Yeah.
that's
it's
a big
well
number,
over the
so.
the national average is like 11.8%. We're
Yep.
way over.
I was going to say 12.
Yes,
So
and I
I
do think
think,
that in a high poverty school, and you would see this nationwide, kids tend to be over identified.
Yes.
So you have a kid in trauma.
Yep.
I had a kid several years ago who had a traumatic event as a kindergartner. As a result, got put into special ed instead of dealing with the trauma. Put him in, stayed in that her whole career. Graduated as a valedictorian with advanced placement classes. She has graduated from Washington State University. She is a special ed teacher.
Wow.
So this was a kid who just got put
Yep.
in it because we didn't know how to deal with trauma at the time, and just stayed in it.
And was this one of your Rogers students?
It was. Yeah, she's
That's a
amazing.
great story.
Yeah.
I think that's a great story to start to wrap things up with.
Sure,
That's a
of
good
course.
success story of seeing those kids and really the potential that they have.
Oh,
And I think
absolutely.
that's what this is all about. You guys are putting some great things into place, whether it's all the counseling that you have to deal with, the trauma that you guys have, the low income, focusing on the populations that need the help, increasing some of those other scores. You guys are doing some great work there. So it's exciting.
It is
It's
exciting.
got to
It's
be
fun.
exciting to be there for 11 years now and
It's
be
fun.
able to watch that
Yeah.
and see that increase. You should be very proud of it.
Yeah, we are. We're
Because
very proud of it.
again, I get to hear all kinds of things outside of the school and outside of the district, and you're legendary. So nice
Well,
job. So
Don't tell my sisters.
that's right. So with that, from Education 101, thanks for being with us and getting the opportunity to listen to the legendary Lori Wyborney from Rogers High School. We'll see you next time. Thanks.
Education 101 is produced in Spokane, Washington by SpokaneTalksOnline.com, which is solely responsible for its content. Education 101 is brought to you by our friends at STCU. Ask Erik a question, recommend a guest, and hear this program again online anytime at SpokaneTalksOnline.com.